In our last video, part 3 of the video review, we ended on this problem, a conversion problem. 220 yards equals how many feet? Now, because there was a direct connection, namely 1 yard equals 3 feet, with a well-known formula, we were able to set up a proportion. However, I'm going to show you how to do it a different way. The fact that 1 yard equals 3 feet means if you put these in a fraction, they would equal 1. Why? Because whenever you have a numerator and a denominator that are the same, it evaluates to 1. You can have anything over itself. Any bizarre thing you want to put over itself, you're always going to get 1. We're going to use that to our advantage when we do conversions. So, because 1 yard equals 3 feet, these are equal. This fraction evaluates to 1. Well, so does 3 feet over 1 yard. Okay, now, how are we going to use this information? First, let's label these two fractions, or shall we say weapons, as A and B. Okay. And we don't need this quite so big either. Okay. Now we're going to do what I call the setup. Here's your setup. You take what they give you. Put it over here, including the units. You take what you're trying to find, and you put it over here on the opposite side of the equal sign, including the units. And in between, you're going to put the number 1. Perfectly legal to come along and multiply one side of the equation by 1. Now, if we just multiply 220 yards by 1, it's not helpful. It's not going to get us where we want to go. However, what if we use one of these two versions of 1? That's going to get us where we want to go. Okay, now, let's bring both versions of 1 over here. Okay. We're going to want to use one of these versions of 1. Look what's going on here. We want to end up with feet. We want to get rid of yards. Which one of these two will accomplish our goal? Let's do both of them. Let's bring version A in here. See where that takes us. Okay, I just took out 1 and I used a different version of 1. So now we have yards in the numerator. If this is helpful, I can do this to make it clear that yards is in the numerator. We have yards in the numerator, feet in the denominator. Does anything cancel out here? We have yards times yards over feet. Answer no. This is the wrong version of 1. We want yards to cancel and feet to emerge. Let's move this guy back. Now let's bring version B in. Does this accomplish our goal? Answer yes. these yards cancel out. The feet don't cancel out, they stay, and that's what we want. So at this point, folks, you just do the math. You ignore the units and you just look at the numbers. And what do we have? We have 220 times 3. 220 times 3, and you get 660. And that's your final answer. Now, why do I go through that? If you watch the other video, it was much more expeditious to just set up the proportion. Well, the reason is, you're not going to always have this luxury where yards and feet have a beautiful formula. There are times when you're going to need to know how to do this. Oops. And here we go. The next problem is one of those times. Right here. Okay. So now the problem wants 3 miles equals how many yards? And I wrote this in 5280 feet equals 1 mile because that's not something that's on the tip of everyone's tongue. Okay, folks, so here's what's going on here. We have 3 miles equals X yards. And we know that 5280 feet equals 1 mile. So how do we go from miles to yards? Okay. Well, there's 2 ways to do this. You can first go from miles to feet using this formula that was provided to us. Okay. Can do that. Now that we have feet, whatever it is, we don't know what it is, now we can go from feet to yards using the fact that 3 feet equals 1 yard. Okay, we can do it that way. But there's going to be a time in your math career where you're going to have to go from miles to inches or miles to centimeters, where you're going to have to go miles to feet to inches to centimeter. Too many steps, too inefficient. Okay, so here is where we're going to use the technique that was introduced in the last few moments. Okay, we're going to erase this for now, and I'm going to show you how to do this directly. These are equal. Therefore, if I put 5280 feet over 1 mile, or 1 mile over 5280 feet, they are both equal to 1. Next, we know that 3 feet over 1 yard, or 1 yard over 3 feet equals 1. Okay, so these are the weapons we're going to use. I'm going to label them. A, B, C, and D. Okay, now we do our setup. What do we know? We know there's 3 miles. put that here. We know we're trying to find x yards. We put that here on the other side of the equal sign. And now, we're going to multiply by 1, not once, but twice. Okay. The way you do this is, you bring in the version of 1 closest to the answer that has yards in the numerator. So which of these 4 have yards in the numerator? It's right there. Okay. I'm going to take out that 1. I'm going to replace it with this. Okay, now, when we do that, we know that whatever happens over here, yards is going to remain in the numerator, which is our answer. Now we ask ourselves, what do we put here to cancel out the feet? So we need something with the feet on top and the miles down below, because we want to cancel these miles out. So we're going to take this version of 1, which is not helpful, and we want to find something that has miles down below, because we want to be able to cancel these out, and feet on the top, because we want to be able to cancel feet out. Which one of these weapons has miles on the bottom and feet on the top? Right here. So I'm going to take this one, and we're going to put that right here. Right there. Okay. Now let's review what we did. We knew we wanted to end up with yards in the numerator, okay? Because this answer has yards in the numerator. So this last version of 1 has to have yards on top. The only one that fit that description was D, 1 yard over 3 feet. Now we have to get rid of miles and feet. How do we do that? Because we only want yards. Well, we have to have feet opposite to this. We have to have it up top. And how do we get rid of that miles? We have to have miles opposite to it on the bottom. Miles cancel, feet cancel, and you're left with yards. Now we do the math. 3 times 5280 over 3. Okay, 3 is this 3. 5280 is here, and 3 is on the bottom. 3's cancel out, and your final answer is 5280. Next one. Do the ratios 9 over 126 and 15 over 85 form a proportion. Okay, I want to put a question mark here, because the way this is worded, we don't know the answer to that. Okay, now, as we alluded to in class, it's inefficient to work with big numbers. So the first thing I would do here is I would go ahead and I would make these respective ratios smaller. So let's start with this one. Always, folks, break down the smaller fraction. Always start with the smaller number. I'm sorry, I was distracted for a second. Now you're going to look for this as being a factor here. Does 3 go into 126? It does. 3 times 42 is 126. So now these 3's cancel out, and we have a smaller version of this 9 over 26. So let's get rid of this and replace that with 3 over 42. We cannot reduce 3 over 42 any further because 3 is a prime number. And actually, wait a minute, my mistake. 3 does go into 42. 42, sorry, been a long day, lots of video. 3 does go into 42. Fourteen times. Okay, to confirm it, 3 times 10 is 30, plus 12 is 42. Okay, so we now have 1 over 14 here. Let's look at 15 over 85. We can break that down into 3 times 5 and ask ourselves, do either of these factors go into 85? Always choose the bigger one. We know that 5 is going to go into 85 because 85 ends in 5. 17. So 15 over 85 is going to reduce to 3 over 17. Cross multiply and ask ourselves, is that a true statement? No way. Therefore, these are not proportional. Next one. Okay. Fractions. You will see something similar to this on your test. So let's talk about how to do this. Ladies and gentlemen, PEMDAS applies here. Okay, we have multiplication and subtraction. We're going to do multiplication first. When we multiply 1 over 6 times 1 over 6, we multiply straight across, and we get 1 over 36. So now we have 1 over 36 minus 1 over 6. So we ask ourselves, which is bigger, 1 over 36 or 1 over 6? If you have a larger number in the denominator, that makes this smaller. So we're going to have a small number minus a big number. We're going to get a negative answer. So that's the intuition on this right now. Now, unlike a moment ago, when we were able to multiply 1 over 6 times 1 over 6 quickly, efficiently, no questions, boom. Multiplication and of fractions versus addition or subtraction of fractions are two different ball games. When you are adding or subtracting fractions, the rules are much more strict. And what are those rules? The rules are, when you are adding or subtracting a fraction, you have to get a common denominator. So how are we going to get a common denominator, and which one are we going to use? Well, when you're looking for common denominators, you can always just multiply the two of them and use that number. But that would give us too big a number to work with, and we don't have to, because look, we can turn 6 into 36. How do we do that? How do I make 6 on the bottom equal to 36? Well, we know we're going to have to multiply it by 6. But what do we put on the top? The answer is 6. 6 over 6 is 1. we can come along and multiply by 1 any time we want with impunity to get results we want. So now we have 1 over 36 minus 6 over 36. When you're adding or subtracting fractions and you have a common denominator, you write down that common denominator and you work with what's going on in the numerator. What's going on in the numerator? We have 1 minus 6. Okay, so this is our final answer, 1 minus 6 over 36. However, we are not going to leave it like that. Now we're going to find out what is 1 minus 6. To do that, we go to the number line. Now, the reason we're allowed to go to the number line is there's only one sign between them. If we had something like this, 1 minus negative 6, then we would have to negotiate that, use the rules to get that to one sign, which in this case would be positive. You have to have only one sign if you go to the number line. You can't go to the number line until you negotiate this. Okay, so let me get rid of that. I hope that didn't confuse you because that had nothing to do with this problem. All right. What is 1 minus 6? Okay, how do we do this, folks? We start at the first spot. The first spot is positive 1. Okay, there's an understood plus there. Once we mark it on the number line as our location, we forget about this guy. Done with him. Next move, we look at the sign that comes next. It's negative. That means we are going to be facing and moving this way. The only question is, how far are we going to move in this direction? And here's your answer, 6 units. So let's do that. The first unit is going to be taken up, getting back to 0. How many more units are we going to move in this direction to total 6? Answer is 5. So we go from 0 in the negative direction, 5 units, that puts us at negative 5. Okay, so to review, we see that, we find our location. That was the plus 1. Once we're done, we shrunk him. We mark our location. We look at the next sign. It's negative. We're facing and moving this way. How far are we going to go? 6 units. Okay, we start moving. Boom, we get to 0, and 1 unit has been used up. 5 are left because this plus this has to equal the 6 unit total move. That puts us at negative 5. We're going to take out 1 minus 6. We're going to replace it with negative 5. This is our final answer.